You know, these were sitting back there by the sound booth, and I was thinking, coming up like this. For one, these lights are really bright, but when you do like public speaking, they sometimes tell you to imagine certain things. I'm thinking, well, if you just had glasses you can't see through, then I don't have to worry about anyone making a funny face at me or giving me one of those looks like, oh, really? Come on. But every week whenever I get a chance to see Carrie in the office, he always has these. And if you ever seen one of the Star Wars movie, it kind of reminds me of Anakin when he's doing the pod races. I guess these are what Carrie wears when he's on his motorcycle. They're pretty cool. I might just start riding motorcycles just to wear a pair of goggles like that. But I don't have, just the goggles. I could just wear them. Maybe I should wear them at work, up at Walgreens. But then I wouldn't be able to see the change I'm supposed to give back to people. Then that might not be as good. We're going to continue with the Cultivate series. But before we do that, I figured 3 days we got Thanksgiving. And I was going to do some like funny Christmas sweater slides. I was looking up some really hilarious Christmas sweaters because, the fad is the ugly Christmas sweaters. And people, man, I was looking up stuff and I'm like, man, some people are just so creative. Whoop. Is that me? But I decided I'll leave that for another time. Maybe Carrie will kind of do that. But I grabbed some Thanksgiving Day slides I thought were kind of funny to me. So hopefully you get a little bit of humor out of it. Go ahead, Rome. Let's show the first one up there. I might have to read it to you to make it kind of funny, but hold on. Go back to that one. That one's funny too, but I guess you can read the caption. So I wait here for the rub down, then I go in the sauna. Sweet. Trying to put yourself in the turkey's place, maybe. And then the next one, I just thought the face was hilarious. I don't know who got this. Go ahead to the next one. The shot of that turkey. I don't know if anyone's ever, taken their own turkey from maybe they have turkeys, but man, think of how they feel. Go to the next one here. This one was kind of funny. He's not going to go quietly. You can go to the next one there, Rome. This one was pretty funny to me. It's Sesame Street. Oh boy. Oh boy. Yeah, that's getting a good. I like that one too. Boo! Someone booing? Someone feels bad for Big Bird. That's for sure. Ouch, ouch. So, and then the last one with Black Friday and sale and coming up too. You got because only in America people trample others for sales exactly one day after being thankful for what they already have. But what I know now, Black Friday sales are like the whole weekend, right? Or sometimes a whole week, or sometimes a whole month. Yeah. Well, I'm getting that question already from some of the people at work where their customers come in and say, "You guys are open on Thanksgiving?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "But isn't your pharmacy closed?" And this particular year, our pharmacy is closed. So if you need a prescription, don't come to my store. The 24-hour stores you can go to. But they say, "What's the point of Walgreens being open if the pharmacy's closed?" Well, and I say, maybe you need batteries or eggs. There's a lot of stuff. That's the way that they justify it. And honestly, I've found for myself, in regards to my faith in Christ, I tell people it actually turns into somewhat of a testimony because I love celebrating Thanksgiving and I love spending time with my family. But hopefully in my heart, I'm thankful more than just one day, a year. And again, I'm not trying to negate the point of Thanksgiving, but it's just, it's a moment where I can tell people, you know what, like, everyone forgets something sometime. I think I've had, there was one year, I think, when Cameron was still at the house here, came in to get some bacon. They were making some kind of breakfast or something. We were available for that. I was there to help you. Customer service. Anyways, so let's dig into this. I hope you have been blessed like me with this Cultivate series. I just love the practical application that I've been learning from it. I think that's one of the best things that I get from when Carrie shares with us every week is he always incorporates ways that we can live it out. This week we're going to continue with faithfulness. But real quick, I was just going to read the verse, kind of what the whole Cultivate series is based off of, is Galatians 5, 22 and 23. And hopefully you guys have heard this before, but it talks about the fruit of the Spirit. It says, "But if the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, against such thing there is no law." How has God been faithful to us? It's a question, how has God been faithful to you? And how can we show faithfulness back to God? There's a lot of unpacking. The video that Carrie kind of pointed me towards, if you don't remember him saying this is kind of borrowed from a series that was used at Willow Creek. They did this back in like June, July, or August, one of the kind of over a period, a month or two. But the teaching pastor who gave this particular lesson on faithfulness, her name was Heather Larson. She had this awesome quote. And I tried looking it up because I was like, well, maybe it's not hers. I wanted to give credit where it was due. But in the video, she says, "God is always, only, ever faithful." That almost sounds like a play on words, but think about that just for a second. I'm going to say it again. God is always, only, ever faithful. If you're taking any kind of notes, you want to write that one down. Because for me, I was like, oh, that was great. I like that thing. I'm going to be using that probably in some conversation at some point. But I was thinking about, there's kind of two sides to this that we'll kind of unpack. Because we're going to talk about God's faithfulness. And there's so many examples in the Word. There's so many examples, hopefully in our lives, where we can point to those moments where, man, God is faithful. But then also, we're going to unpack what it means for us to cultivate that faithfulness, for us to live in faithfulness to Him. I was watching this week, I'm going to pull my phone out here. How many of you guys like mystery kind of stuff? Anyone? I need some participation here. Raise your hand if you like mystery stuff. Okay. I watch on Amazon Prime, they got Unsolved Mysteries. Does anybody remember Robert Stack? Yeah. That guy's awesome. He just had this tone. It was something about maybe you can help solve a mystery. It just like brings chills down your bones as like you're watching it. And half of them, they're not even like scary. They're just about things that they're unexplainable. And I was watching this episode this week, and I realized after kind of going back to it, I was like, man, that kind of plays into faithfulness. It was about a girl named Trisha Zemba. On Christmas Eve 1993, 14-year-old Trish Zemba lost control and fell from her house. She fell from her house, she would lose control too. While out on a ride. Because she was in shock, she did not realize how serious her injuries were. 10 days later, while in the bathtub, she passed out. Her pain increased tremendously and she had trouble moving. After 5 weeks of pain, her parents took her to the hospital. The doctors gave her large amounts of morphine, but it did not help relieve her pain. She was later diagnosed with a rare and usually incurable nerve disorder called reflex sympathetic dystrophy, or RSD. This caused a horrendous pain, especially in her legs. She was given several injections of pain-killing drugs into her spinal column, but they did not seem to help. The pain continued to worsen, and doctors feared that she would have to be institutionalized. Her parents were told that most patients with RSD either die, commit suicide, or go insane due to the pain. Despite the bleak outcome, Trisha's parents continued to pray for her, hoping for a miracle. Her doctors proposed a surgery that is usually for terminal cancer patients, implanting a morphine pump into her body. Trisha's family prayed for her recovery for weeks, all the way up until the day before her surgery. Amazingly, on March 11, 1994, Trisha's pain inexplicably vanished. This was just 1 day before her surgery. Within minutes, she was able to get up from her bed and walk into the hallway. Her doctors had no explanation for her recovery. Trish and her family believe that her recovery was due to the infinite power of faith. The reason I wanted to show that, or tell you that part to you, was as I was watching this, when you watch Unsolved Mysteries, they kind of interject like little kind of interviews from the people who were involved in it. And they kept going back to her parents. And her mom, especially, is faithfulness. she almost, as you see her talking at these different points during this episode, she never wavered. She said, something's going to happen. Because the doctors were at the point of basically trying to tell her mom, you need to come to grips with this reality. Like, there's probably nothing that can be done. And she kept praying. She reached out to her church. They were praying for her. And at the end of the episode, it finishes, and well, this particular doctor was being interviewed, and then she had a couple points in the episode as well, but you just see this humility from this doctor who basically said, every now and then, like, well, not that, I'd probably say it's more than every now and then, but she said, you see something like this, and it only reinforces how God works in mysterious ways. Like, there is nothing, she said, there's nothing in the medical field that can explain why she was healed from RSD. And I think she actually left the day that she got normal feeling back in her legs. She left, I think, the same day, which is kind of remarkable. You're kind of like, I was thinking to myself as I'm watching, like, you think they would have forced her to stay in the hospital just to make sure nothing kind of came back? But it was just an amazing example. That's not always how sometimes things work out, but the faithfulness of her parents who kept praying. I thought it was just, it fit perfectly with today's discussion. In Galatians, like I said, shared just a second ago, Galatians 5, the word faithfulness is actually, and I'm going to have it up on a slide right here. It's the way I've heard it pronounced as pistis. It means, literally the word for faith means full of faith. I thought that was kind of neat, because the word that's used in Galatians 5 just means faith, but the best definition that they could give would be full of faith. And I thought about that for us on our journey. Man, like, we need to be full of faith in everything that we do. What does it look like to be full of faith in different areas of our lives? And here's just a few you could think of. How can we be full of faith in our marriage? I'm doing some counseling. Me and Stephanie are doing some counseling. And one of the things that I was challenged with this past week, one of the counselors kind of wanted to just really get me saturated in the concept of what love is. And he had me memorize this quote. And I love it. It says, love is a choice to actively and sacrificially pursue the needs and best interests of another person. In marriage, what is that? How can we be full of faith? By putting another person's needs first? I think that shows, because our faith in God should dictate our actions. Living in that faith should transform itself into the way that we live. How about in the workplace? Same type of thing. At Walgreens, I found sometimes some of the most difficult team members I've worked with are Christians. And here's why. I'm a big believer that you are what you got to live it out on a daily basis. And for me, I know that Walgreens isn't the most prestigious job out there in the world, but if I'm doing it, I want to do the best I can do at it. Because I think the way that I work can be a witness of what my faith means. And those times where I've come across people who I just love to death, I tell them, hey, like, sometimes our mind kind of tricks us and tells us, it's just Walgreens, I'm working, or maybe it's a fast food restaurant, or maybe it's just, it's not a big deal. It's like, and you kind of get lackadaisical, like, you take a weaker approach, and you're like, well, who cares? I'm just working here. It's like, no, we got to do the best we can do, no matter what the job is. How about in our finances? I mean, all of us would probably say in finances, there's a lot of opportunity for being full of faith, right? How many people live paycheck to paycheck? Yeah. You got to be full of faith. There are moments when things are so tight, you don't know where it's always coming from. How about in our walk? Something I've been talking about the last couple weeks with a few people. I don't know about you when you pray, but how many people when you finish a prayer use the words, "Let your will be done"? Anybody? Because for me, I've kind of noticed almost at the end of all my prayers, whether it's me privately, maybe just not verbally saying it, or whether it's public or with other people, I always tend to finish a prayer with, God, let your will be done, amen. And I was just thinking about that the last couple of weeks, how I don't think I know when I pray all the time, I actually mean that. A lot of times when I'm praying, I think I want my will to be done. Who does that? Come on. Participation. Hands up. They got someone back there holding their hand down and they don't want to put it up. God, my will be done. Amen. Right? No. Let your will be done. Do we really mean that? Because when his will is done a lot of times, does it always match up with what we think should be done? I know it's not for me. It's tough. I really have been thinking and praying a lot about this. Being full of faith in our walk is believing and knowing he knows what's best. Believing and knowing that despite the circumstances, he knows what's best. Or how about the last one I put on here, just another area of how we can be full of faith is in relationships. Again, it kind of can tie into our marriage. I think the way that we approach our relationships, the way that we live out our faith, has to be done with action. If we don't do that, I think people will probably more often not, especially if we're someone who professes to be a Christian, people will more often not question what our faith really means. All right? Have you ever been in a situation where you look back, or maybe a moment in your life where you look back and go, man, that was probably a very poor witness? Carrie talks about little different practical situations in our life at times. Driving, right? You ever had one of those moments where you cut someone off? Right? Or maybe you're the one who got cut off. You want to tell them the way you think about them? Or like, what are you doing? Or for Carrie, the one that stuck in my mind, he's talked about this a couple weeks now, the shopping cart thing. Who's been good? Who's been better at putting their shopping carts away? Right? Or maybe even putting someone else's shopping cart away. Right? I was at Costco last night, and I don't know if you guys have heard a couple months ago, back in the summer, someone got killed in the parking lot. People haven't changed the way they drive at Costco. It's still crazy. It's nuts. Oh, that was me. Sorry. But looking for those opportunities in our relationships and the way that we live our lives. I like something that came to mind when I was digging into the cultivating faithfulness. I was thinking of like a word association. Faithful, and I don't know if I have this up here, but I looked up kind of a definition, if you will. You can do this, Google, Webster, or whatever. The definition said loyal, adhering firmly to a person or cause. And I thought that was really good. And then I looked up some synonyms. Synonyms? I love cinnamon. No. I looked up some synonyms, and one was, I'm going to just throw out a few of them here. It said adhesion, allegiance, attachment, commitment, consistency, dedication, devotion, faith, fidelity, fastness, loyalty, steadfastness. And the one for me that came to my mind before I looked up that definition was being consistent. When we're full of faith, we should be consistent. Do I have that consistent thing up there? You might have to click again. I was playing with the transitions or something, and bam! I got another word there, persistent, we'll talk about too, but I've been thinking about this for my own life. Over the last, I don't know, I'm going to say 3 years now, I've kind of been on a journey of just trying to get a little healthier. And I've had kind of roller coasters. I've had ebbs and flows of what that's been. And some people have approached me and asked me. I've had people at work kind of ask me things. And I said, yeah, to me, I really have wanted to just transform the way I'm trying to live. I don't want to say like, oh, I found this particular diet or I found this workout regimen. And it's really trying to transform the way I think. And one of the first things that I found that was super important, and apparently our world is a lot of water and our bodies are a lot of water. I need to start drinking more water, right? And I need to be consistent with that. And I've tried to learn how to be consistent with making sometimes some better eating choices. Because I don't know if this is a good thing to talk about with Thanksgiving coming. I love food. Food is awesome. I mean, I've kind of been searching for myself, investigating for myself, and I've come to the conclusion that I'm kind of a food addict. Because I was telling someone the other day, I could be at a great restaurant like, I'm going to say this is a great Red Robin, right? And I could be eating a delicious sandwich. I eat California chicken sandwich because it's got guacamole and bacon. Am I getting mouth water in here a little bit? And I can be eating this delicious sandwich, and I'm thinking about what I'm going to eat when I get home. I'm done with the sandwich. Now I'm eating the bottomless steak fries. Or good, they have really good sweet potato fries too. I'm eating fries, and I'm thinking about what I'm going to eat after that. And so for me, in this journey of trying to get healthier, I've realized moderation is a good thing, right? And even sometimes abstinence, like choosing not to have something, because you got to find some level of consistency. It's tough. And then I've also tried to incorporate, there is some fitness parts to it. I've tried to incorporate some of that, and that's tough. If any of you have ever done anything, I mean, there are times in my life where doing the basic things are tough. But trying to incorporate something else that's going to make you hot and sweaty sometimes, or maybe interrupt something else like relaxing, like sitting down, that's hard to do, right? And sometimes you can get some can-do attitude, and you get started and you start doing it for a little bit. But you know what? Eventually, your attitude is going to change, and you're going to say, "Nah, this isn't convenient." But if you can find a way to be consistent with it, you get to see some results. That's the same thing in our journey with Christ. If we can find those ways to, sometimes we use the word habits, routine. If we can be consistent in the way that we approach that. And again, I'm going to say this is my own personal note. I've realized for myself, I'm going to say trying, because it's a journey just like my walk with Christ. And trying to get healthier, it's improved my journey with Christ because have more opportunity, whether it's time to read or whether it's just how I feel. And I'm going to touch on that second word I put up there, persistent. And this one kind of takes consistent to another level. It says firm or obstinate, this is the definition, firm or obstinate continuance in a course of action in spite of difficulty or opposition. If you have your phone, you can look this definition up too, but I thought that was really good. Firm or obstinate continuance in a course of action in spite of difficulty or opposition. Man, how does that not apply to our faith? This isn't the passage we're going to dig into, and I'm not going to... you know what works out great? I'm going to go side note. What works out great about Shoebox Day is I already like to be short and sweet and to the point, but with all the great activity and getting to do the shoe boxes and all that kind of stuff, it makes it even less time I got to think about. Carrie said that you can do like 5 minutes. I'm like, I know, 5 minutes, I'll be good. But no, this if you want one chapter in the Bible, if you're just searching, maybe you're reading through something, or maybe you haven't read for a day or two or a week or whatever it may be. If you want one chapter to read and just be like God smacking you in the face, Corinthians chapter 9 has got so much good stuff in it. But in terms of the word persistent, I love, Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 9, I'm going to start with verse 24. I don't even have it up there, so there's nothing to go to. But I was just thinking about this morning, actually. Do you not know that in a race, all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last. But we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I may have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. He's saying that for our walk with Christ. That's the mindset we should have. I don't know, this morning I was just thinking, man, that's so perfect. Because I don't know about you, but my flesh sometimes tells me, nah, I don't want to do that. That's not for me. Being firm or obstinate and continuing the course of action in spite of difficulty. Okay, so here let's look at an example of, real quick, of God's faithfulness. And I'm going to actually dig into Genesis chapter 22. This I do have on the slides, but you know what? When I put the slides together, I didn't realize how little the font was. So my eyes are getting bad, apparently, and so I had to sign up for vision insurance this year. So can anyone read that? Dang. My vision really is bad. So I'm going to read it off this paper. But we're going to look at Abraham. If you remember Abraham, pretty good guy. God decided he was going to bless him and that all the nations are going to flow from his heirs. So here's a little section here of talking about cultivating faithfulness. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place that God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, "Father?" "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and the wood are here," Isaac said, "but where's the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the 2 of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar, on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham!" "Here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, and because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." I don't know about you, but as I was reading that again, I saw some similarities to another moment that would happen later on. If you noticed, this is, I think I pulled this from the NIV version, but he said, "Take your son, your only son." I still consider myself a young parent. I got little kids, and anyone who's had little kids or watched little kids knows the amount of pressure and stress they can put on you in a very quick moment. But I can't imagine being put in this situation. I can't imagine. I think we're kind of being given, as we read in Genesis 22, we're being given this big picture of kind of what was happening. But can you imagine God telling you, "I want you to take your son. I want you to take your daughter." And we obviously admire Abraham's faithfulness. But any parent would say, "What? What, you're asking me to do what?" And then, again, as you kind of get into verse 6, and when Isaac speaks up, I got to be thinking, Isaac had to know something was up before this. He's like thinking, because he understood what the traditions were as far as sacrificing burnt offerings. And he's like, "Dad, what's happening here?" I don't know if it's like this for you, but as I read it, to me, I'm just thinking, I began to ask the question, maybe I have limitations with that. with that faithfulness. But Abraham, he didn't waver. And I love Abraham's answer in verse 8 where he says, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. We see Abraham's faithfulness, and then we see God's faithfulness. And you fast forward and you look at what God did to transform humanity. He gave up his son, his only son. And not only was God faithful, but Jesus was faithful, because, again, as you understand the story, Jesus had points in his journey where he could have pulled out and said, nah, I don't know about this. But he wanted his Father's will to be done. I just think about that. How can I be full of faith like Abraham? I love another little passage that ties into Abraham's story is Romans 4. And in Romans 4, Paul kind of goes through this explanation of how deep Abraham's faith was. And he says, it was not through the law that Abraham and his offspring received the promise that he would be the heir of the world, but through the righteousness that comes by faith. There's another passage where it says, Abraham was considered God's friend because of his faith. So this is what we'll finish with. Cultivating faithfulness, or cultivating faith, or being full of faith, starts with obedience. I think I have that. Bam. And this is 3 points that I'm borrowing from Heather Larson, again, at Willow Creek. And the 3 that she brought up was, first, obedience to God's commandments. They're all right there. 2, second, obedience to God's promptings. And third, obedience to God's path. And if you read that story, we read that story of Abraham, you see all of those happening there. And word association again. Thinking of obedience, I think of the word maybe discipline can be a good word. I was telling Carrie this week, I think a lot of us associate discipline with like a negative context. But discipline is actually pretty important. If you look at the definition of discipline, the third, it's funny that when I looked up, this might be Google's definition or Webster's, but there was like 1A, 1B, 1C. And 1C was self-control. The definition for discipline is self-control. In Galatians 5, let's see. Galatians 5, 22, 23, you go from faithfulness, gentleness, and then you go to self-control. Seems like it kind of works together, but I think in our journey, figuring out a way to incorporate disciplines in our lives, again, I said habits, routines, it's so essential. Because cultivating faithfulness starts with obedience. If we can be obedient, if we can be disciplined in our journey, we find that the fruit just starts to come. I wrote these words down. Again, if you are better than me at kind of looking up stuff, I was trying to find someone to give this quote to, or give credit to this quote to, but I've kind of tried to apply this to me the last few years. Is adversity can be a great tool for growth, even when it's self-inflicted. I think the moments where we seem to grow the most is through adversity, right? In sports, I'm a sports guy. In sports, you tend to learn more from when you lose, when things aren't going your way, than you do when you win. Because when you win, you're celebrating. You're like, yeah, we did good. When you lose, though, you have all this stuff you can go back and go, I didn't do that really well. Same thing in our walk, same thing in our lives. We grow when things, hopefully, when we learn from what things don't work well. And then when it's self-inflicted, again, that comes back to obedience and discipline. How many of you, the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning is you dig into the Word? Anyone? There's some hands, I see that. I can guarantee you there come moments where you don't want to do that first, right? And it takes discipline to make that a priority in the morning. And it's also obedience, right? I mean, if we want to learn more about God, if we want to learn more how to live like Jesus Christ, we need to be digging into the Word. Same thing with being here today, right? How many of you, and we've got to be honest here, how many of you, even for a second, either yesterday, today, maybe some point throughout the week, thought, I'm not sure if I'm going to be here this week? Thank you for your honesty, right? Sometimes it happens. We're human. But what's the value of being here? We grow, we learn, we share together, we sing together. We get donuts sometimes. Man, look at this. Hopefully all you were blessed this morning by seeing the impact, right, of the shoe boxes. So here's my last, I like to finish with questions. How can we cultivate faithfulness or be full of faith? 1, be consistent in our time with Him, in the Word and prayer, being here at fellowship or wherever you might be. And 2, find opportunities to be a living example of faithfulness. God's greatest demonstration of His faithfulness is revealed through us. When we've submitted our lives to Christ, when we've submitted ourselves to recognizing that our hope, our purpose for living only has come through the sacrifice that Jesus Christ made, the way that we live our lives in faithfulness is the way that God shares His love to this world. How we live our lives and trust in Him despite the circumstances, despite how difficult things are. I was telling Carrie, I was tempted to share a song, just not me sing, but a song that I remember I first heard when I was younger. Stephen Curtis Chapman, some of you may have heard of him. He's a Christian artist, but back in the 90s, he had a song called Heaven in the Real World, and in one of the recordings, before the song started, he had like an excerpt of, I want to say it's Billy Graham, but in the excerpt of Billy Graham's, he basically says he meets tons of people who say they feel basically distraught, they feel helpless with the things that they see happening around the world. And they question, like, where's God? Where's He been? And Billy Graham goes on to basically say, like, first we recognize that He's the hope that we have, but 2, we have to bring heaven to this world. It's not going to come through, he says, it's not going to come through the government, it's not going to come through this, it's not going to come through that. The way that we live our lives, the way that we are faithful will be the hope. The way that we trust in Him. Let's pray. Father,